What's up guys, Nito here, and today I want to showcase the Flurry Rogue build that I've been playing. I'm currently level 80. I am in World Tier 4 doing Nightmare Dungeons, and this is actually a Tier 50 Nightmare Dungeon. So if you don't know, Tier 50 has mobs that are like over level 100, so level 105 or so. And I'm only level 80, so that's 25 levels higher than me. And I am able to clear this content for the most part. So I'll just go show the build, show the skill tree and everything real quick, just to explain what we're doing here. So first thing we're doing is using Puncture. Puncture is a marksman skill, but it uses your daggers. It's actually the only marksman skill that uses your daggers. And it is great for applying vulnerable as well as slow. So it throws out 3 daggers, and as long as at least 2 of them hit the same enemy, it will be applying vulnerable. So we are only putting 1 point into that because we don't really use it for damage. It's just there for proccing vulnerable as well as for getting combo points. So Rogue has combo points, which are stack up right here, and when you use a core skill, it gets extra effect from the combo points. So in this case, our core skill is Flurry, and Flurry is our main damage for this build. So we want, we have level 9 Flurry currently. We want to pump up the levels as much as possible. And you can see that with combo points, you actually get a bunch more damage, but also a 45% attack speed bonus if you have 3 combo points. So that is really important. This build is stacking a ton of attack speed. And the reason is we just want to spam Flurry as much as possible. We want to hit as many times as possible. And that's going to proc Lucky Hit as much as possible. The other reason to be attacking fast with a Flurry build is because of this right here. Flurry can heal you for 1% of your max health per Flurry up to 12% of your max health. So Flurry is going to hit 4 times. So if you're hitting 3 enemies, as long as they are vulnerable or crowd controlled, which is basically every enemy for this build, you're going to heal 12% of your max life per Flurry. So the faster you Flurry, the faster you heal. It's going to keep you alive. And you also have Siphoning Strikes, heal for 3% of your max life when you crit strike a close enemy. So every time we crit, we're going to be healing even more. And we also use Improved Flurry, which is going to, anytime you hit a single vulnerable enemy, it's going to spread vulnerable to all nearby enemies. And this is basically just like really good for when you apply vulnerable with Puncture to a single enemy, it's just going to make the entire pack instantly vulnerable. So that's extremely strong, and it's basically how we keep up vulnerable all the time on everything. We also just have some close damage reduction here. Then we got Weapon Mastery just to get some extra damage. We use Dash just for movement, as well as applying, if you dash through an enemy, they take some increased crit damage. And then we use Shadow Step also for movement, but it's also one of the few ways to get unstoppable as a rogue. Note that this is effectively like no duration unstoppable. It breaks whatever CC you have on you, but it doesn't make you immune to CC for a couple seconds afterwards. It's just like pretty much instant breaking of the CC, and then you're back to being able to be CC'd. So you do have to be a little careful with it. We use the Enhanced Shadow Step for crit chance against whoever we Shadow Step to. So you'll probably see me against some of the tankier enemies. You can dash through them and then Shadow Step back to them, and that gives you both the crit damage multiplier and the crit chance on that enemy. So it's a good way to do some extra DPS. And then lastly, we have the Discipline Shadow Step for resetting or reducing the cooldown when you Shadow Step to different enemies. So we're going to be Shadow Stepping a lot. It's a really great way to just jump around the battlefield, especially because Flurry is a melee skill. So it's just great for getting into close range at all times. This is another really important node, these two right here. So when you critically strike a dazed enemy, they are knocked down for 0.5 seconds. And then after knocking back or knocking down an enemy, you gain 12% increased crit strike against them for 3 seconds. So how are we dazing enemies? On our Paragon, we have, or sorry, not our Paragon, our aspects, we have dealing direct damage to a vulnerable enemy has up to 43% chance to daze them for 2 seconds. So basically, again, Since we're attacking so fast and we're stacking a bit of lucky hit, we're going to be proccing daze constantly. Basically on everything, it's going to be permanently dazed. And you can just repeatedly proc it over and over and over, and that's going to repeatedly knock the enemy down, and then that's going to also give you that extra crit chance. So that's really powerful. Also, just going back to Shadow Step, we use the Shadow Step has an additional charge aspect, as well as recharge. You get a charge back when you kill something with Shadow Step, so it just helps Shadow Step always be available. Also very powerful. So back to the skill tree. From this section, we actually don't use anything, so we don't use any subterfuge, so there's no traps or anything involved on this build. However, we do take the agile using a cooldown, increases your dodge chance, so that's like every time we dash or shadow step, we're going to get some extra dodge chance. It's nice for staying alive. And then we also have exploit, just some extra damage to healthy and injured, and malice, and I actually have +3 to this on my amulet, so that's 18% multiplier to vulnerable enemies. And that is a multiplicative bonus, so it's not just additive with other vulnerable damage on your gear, it's actually a multiplier. And then down here, this is an important one for Flurry. We use cold imbuement, and we only need 1 point in this because the chill amount is 28% per hit. And Flurry hits 4 times, so that stacks up to be over 100, and that means that enemies will be instantly frozen when they're hit with Flurry. That's imbued with cold. And then the other thing is that mixed cold imbuement is going to give us 40 times damage multiplier to frozen enemies from imbued skills. So specifically from the cold imbued Flurry, you're going to get bonus damage. But then over here, we use Frigid Finesse to get 30 times, or sorry, not 30 times, but 30% multiplier against frozen enemies, or half that for chilled enemies. And this applies to even non-imbued skills. So basically the idea is to freeze them, and then we just spam Flurry, and even though not all of our Flurries are going to be imbued, they're still going to get a big damage multiplier. And then lastly, we have Shadow Clone as our ultimate. Shadow Clone is basically just like an 80% damage multiplier for 15 seconds. And really important, Shadow Clone gives you unstoppable for 5 seconds when you pop it. So this is actually the only way on Rogue to become unstoppable for a duration. So like I said with Shadow Step, it does give you unstoppable, but it's basically just like instantly gone. So you can just get CC'd right afterwards. Whereas when you pop your ultimate, you are going to have 5 seconds of being unstoppable. So don't have to worry about any kind of CC for those 5 seconds. So you can just kind of go ham, spam your Shadow Clone, or use your Shadow Clone, spam your Flurry, and do a ton of damage. And then this is important here. So lucky hit, up to 30% chance to gain 8 energy. And for every 100 energy you spend, you gain 15% increased lucky hit chance. So these work really nicely with our fast attack speed because we're spending energy really quickly, and then we're just kind of stacking up our lucky hit chance, and then Innervate is going to help us sustain the energy cost of that, which is very important because obviously fast attack speed, you're spending energy more quickly, so you need something to sustain the cost. And then down here we just have Haste, which is just giving us some extra movement speed at high energy and extra attack speed at low energy. And then we use the Close Quarters Combat Key passive because, so basically damaging an enemy with a marksman skill or a cutthroat skill is going to give 10% increased attack speed for each one. So that's 20% increased attack speed if you're doing both. And then additionally, if you've done both, you also get a 20% damage multiplier against crowd-controlled enemies. So again, everything is dazed or chilled or frozen for this build, so pretty much everything is going to be crowd-controlled. And marksman skill, the marksman skill we use is Puncture, and the cutthroat skill we use is Flurry, so we're pretty much always going to have both of these buffs up at all times, so it's a very nice damage multiplier, and you get a bunch more attack speed, which, as I already explained, is very important for the build. It's so important, actually, that we use the crit strikes with core skills, increase your attack speed aspect on our two-hander, on our crossbow. And ideally you want like a max rolled one, but I'm only at 40%, but you basically just want as much attack speed as possible. Then we're also using making an enemy vulnerable with a lucky hit has up to 50% chance to grant up to 9% crit strike, also very strong. And the condemnation dagger, this is actually extremely important for the build because we're constantly spamming both our puncture and our flurry. This is going to occasionally we'll throw out a single puncture, we'll get 3 combo points, and then we'll be able to flurry, and it's gonna make core skills with that use 3 combo points are gonna have a big damage multiplier. This is just extremely good for this build, and you'll see because like essentially when I clear monsters, I'm always just like holding down both buttons. I'm holding down puncture and I'm holding down flurry. And so the way it works is like you'll just spam puncture until you have the energy to flurry, and then go back to spamming puncture, and that just kind of repeats. It's very strong. It also works nicely with this aspect, which is that basic skills increase the damage of the next core skill by 10%, up to 30%. So if you have 3 punctures in a row to stack up your combo points, that's going to give you another big multiplier on top of the multiplier from this one, and on top of the damage multiplier or the extra damage you just get from using 3 combo points. And then we do need a little bit of extra help sustaining our energy costs, so we use the basic skills generate energy when you hit elites. So that's also very important because you don't want to just run out of energy because we're attacking so fast. The amulet is a bit of a flex slot. I chose to use the extra unstoppable effect when you become injured while crowd controlled. So this is a great way to like kind of a get out of jail free card for if you get stunned or frozen or whatever, and mobs are just destroying you, and none of your like shadow step charges are up and your ultimate's not up. This is going to save you. Ideally, I think you probably want the increased the armor stacking one. I forget what it's called, but it gives you like stacks of percent increased armor the more you hit, and it can stack up to like 50% or something. So that's extremely important. Armor is really, really good. I try to stack as much as possible. And then I am currently using the Cowl of the Nameless. I'm kind of on the fence about whether I even need this in the build. It just gives you a whole bunch of lucky crit chance against crowd-controlled enemies, it's definitely useful for the build, but it doesn't really work against bosses because bosses don't count as crowd-controlled unless they are staggered. So it's not that great for bosses, but for like general Nightmare Dungeon clearing and stuff, it's pretty good. And then on our chest, we use the vulnerable has a chance to daze. So again, that's like a core part of the build. We want to be proccing that daze as much as possible. And then on our gloves, we just use the flurry hits enemies in a circle. That's totally mandatory for the build because you want to be able to hit enemies like all around you, pretty much. And on our pants, we use the close quarters combat key passive, gives you 5% increased dodge chance for every time you're hit until you dodge, and then that resets. It's just another nice extra layer of defense there. And dodge is pretty good because it just completely negates all damage from an attack. And then, like I showed before, we have the shadow step aspect on our boots, which is going to just give us extra charges and make it reset when we kill stuff with the shadow step. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and show you this dungeon. Hold up, my controller. Okay, there we go. Oops. So generally you're going to shadow step the enemy, and then you're going to throw a couple of punctures, and then you're just going to flurry them. Dash is just great for movement and just jumping around quickly. can see these enemies are level 104. So 24 levels higher than me. Actually, before I forget, I did want to use potion. So there you can see the enemies just get frozen when I use my imbuement. Can't let those go off. So generally for high-level dungeons, you want to be using the Iron Skin Elixir. I've found is really nice. So that makes my armor go up to, actually up to 100% physical damage reduction against enemies that are equal level, but obviously we're not fighting enemies that are equal level, so you do kind of want to stack as much armor as possible, as much damage reduction as possible. It's very valuable. There are definitely still enemies that can one-shot you, especially at this tier. I found that the red archer guys are kind of the worst. But you can see this guy just falling down repeatedly. That's because he's gotten dazed, and then he gets knocked down just over and over. So stuff will eventually become unstoppable the more you CC them. So, you know, at low HP, like some of these mobs might stop getting knocked down and stop being dazed, so you do have to just kind of be careful about that.
I'm not ready yet.
And you can see how much I'm healing right now, so you can kind of just like be in the middle of stuff and just constantly be healing as long as there's stuff to hit continuously. Which makes it really, really nice for staying alive. I also have some like increased healing on my amulet and stuff. You have to actually, one of the big things to worry about is like the explosion effects on the ground, because you are always in close range with this build. You're kind of always on top of stuff, so that's actually a big problem. Especially in the later Nightmare dungeons, that's usually what's going to get you killed. Especially because like there's so much like vulnerable text spam that you can't even see what's going on half the time. You will definitely occasionally die doing dungeons at this tier, especially when things get hairy like that, and there's a lot of these champion guys get stacked up, and so you have to kill them first before you can damage anything else, which is very annoying. And then you get CC'd like crazy. That's why you really need as much unstoppable as possible. Otherwise, you're gonna get just pain CC'd to death. generally, as long as there's stuff to hit, you're going to be healing a lot. So as long as you're not CC'd, you can kind of just keep spam healing over and over. Go. Dungeon complete. So yeah, that's the build. That's the Frozen Flurry Rogue. I guess also I can show the Paragon board that I have, although really it's not... I didn't really plan this out beforehand, so it's kind of just the work in progress, I suppose. But yeah, so we use like the closer glyph here, so you get some extra cutthroat skill damage, Flurry's cutthroat skill. And more importantly, you get reduced damage while wielding a melee weapon. Over here, we are using Chip, which is just going to give you increased damage, damage multiplier when you deal physical damage. And the nice thing about Flurry is that it hits so many times that it's really easy to stack up effects like this. This legendary node is actually extremely important, so your marksman skill grants your next cutthroat still 25% multiplier, and vice versa. So like obviously we're just spamming puncture, which is gonna continually give this multiplier to our flurries, so it's very strong. Big damage multiplier from that. And then we have over here we have crit damage and crit strikes restore energy cost. Again, that helps us sustain because we are spamming our flurry quite a lot. And then down here we have, this one is extremely important. This is the exploit, which is going to make enemies vulnerable when you first hit them. So you don't need this to make enemies vulnerable because, again, puncture can make enemies vulnerable, and flurry will spread that vulnerable to nearby enemies. But this just makes it so much smoother because you don't have to puncture initially. Like everything will just be vulnerable right away. And it also gives some vulnerable damage, which is also a nice multiplier as well. And that's all I've got so far. You know, we've got some pretty good rare nodes. I tend to focus more on the like armor nodes and stuff on the tree because I think armor is just so extremely important for stacking for high level dungeons like this. So that would be my recommendation, is just getting as much armor as possible. And again, like, I'm kind of on the fence about whether I want to use this unstoppable aspect or switch it to the armor one for my amulet. I think I will probably try out the armor one at some point, but anyways, yeah. So that's the build. It's pretty powerful. I think it's got a lot of potential. Again, this is only level 80, and I'm already doing tier 50, so, you know, getting another 20 levels worth of Paragon points, plus I think I still have some Renown to finish as well. I think I can get like another 12 or so Paragon points from that, so there's definitely a lot more damage and survivability you can push out of this build. So I'm excited to see where it can go. Anyways, thanks for watching. See you next time.